Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sorting Thoughts podcast. And today we have a very important book club meeting. It is really time that I talk about the last few books that I have read through July, August, September, and October. There are some really interesting ones. So if you're interested in that, let's get into it. First things first, we're going to start with a book called Wedding People that was written by Alison Espach. Hopefully, I have said her name right. And the story is about a propulsive and uncommonly wise novel about one unexpected wedding guest and the surprising people who help her start anew. It's a beautiful day in Newport, Rhode Island, when Phoebe Stone arrives at the Grand Cornwall Inn wearing a green dress and gold heels, not a bag in sight, alone. She is immediately mistaken by everyone in the lobby for one of the wedding people, but she's actually the only guest at the Cornwall who isn't here for the big event. Phoebe is here because she's dreamed of coming for years. She hoped to shuck oysters and take sunset sails with her husband. Only now, she's here without him, at rock bottom, and determined to have one last decadent splurge on herself. Meanwhile, the bride has accounted for every detail and every possible disaster the weekend might yield except for, well, Phoebe and Phoebe's plan, which makes it that much more surprising when the two women can't stop confiding in each other. In turns, absurdly funny and devastatingly tender, Alison Despach's The Wedding People is ultimately an incredible, nuanced, and resonant look at the winding path we can take to places we never imagined. I gave The Wedding People 5 stars. First of all, I just love how the main character, Phoebe, finally put herself first in the end. She's not walking out of that wedding week hand in hand with another guy, but hand in hand with herself. And it's, if not the most beautiful thing she could have done for herself. And I loved that. Like sometimes you have to walk on your own for a bit before you're able to walk with someone else. And I feel like she wasn't ever ready to be in a relationship again. And that's what she did. She didn't jump into the next relationship just to be in a relationship, because also society tells you that a woman near a certain age needs to be in a relationship, but that's not the case. We don't always have the same path, and she respected her own path, and she respected her limits, and she respected herself in the end because she prioritized herself. And I feel like whether you're a man or a woman, prioritizing yourself is one of the most beautiful things that one can do, I feel like. Because I feel like also, like, before being able to fully spend time with someone else, you need to be able to spend time with yourself first. And Phoebe didn't know how to do that anymore. And I think like both her and her husband got lost in this relationship. And they didn't really know who they were anymore without one another and without this routine. And it's probably and mainly why they also broke up, and that he had a mistress and all of that. So I feel like prioritizing yourself is one of the most beautiful things you can do for yourself, even if you're in a relationship. Like sometimes you need your alone time, like you need your reset time, and that's okay, and that's totally normal. This book was just really brilliant in terms of showing how much a woman is so desperate to end her life after her husband has asked her for divorce, because she doesn't see anything else she could do in this life. Like I've said before, she got lost in this marriage. But then throughout the book, she realized it was one of the best things that could have happened to her at this divorce, because she's never prioritized herself before. And so she realizes that during the time that she's had to think about, like possibly ending her life, well, that's what she was actually set on, was to end her life. That was her plan. But as soon as she meets the bride and she has another point of view of a very much liberated woman and one that isn't stuck in routine and all that stuff, she actually realizes that it was actually very freeing for her, that divorce, and that now she gets to figure out who she is. She gets to enjoy new things, probably, and discover new things, and maybe relearn a few things that she's learned to maybe hate throughout the course of their routine or throughout their marriage. Anything, like she's really like closing the page of that book, and she gets to start a new book, and she gets to write her own story on her own terms, and she gets to be whoever she wants to be. And I think she's 40, maybe in her 40s. And, life doesn't end there. That's also something that society tells you, is that a woman, if she's not married by 30, and if she's not still in a marriage at 40 years old, she's literally trash, or like she won't go anywhere personally in her life anymore, and her career is starting to end. And that's actually absolutely not the case. That's what they want you to believe, but it's actually not the case. Like, she's literally starting over and her life has just begun. And I think that's very beautiful and that's very empowering to women to whoever read this book. And she's also one of those characters that has had this tendency of prioritizing others. And when you do that constantly, and when you've never learned to prioritize yourself, you don't entirely know yourself. And specifically, you have no idea what you want in life. And that's a real struggle. And that's a struggle that I've had to deal with myself. Because if you're a people pleaser, you know how that feels. You know how that feels. You don't want to say no to others because you don't want to be a disappointment in their eyes. And or you don't want, or you can't handle conflict, and you're like, I might as well just say yes and get it over with, and then I'll be done. And then, but when you have this tendency to always say yes and don't put limits and not say no, people will and take advantage of you. And once you say no, once you start to realize that, well, I need to start saying no. And when you do that to these people that you've pleased throughout your entire life, they're kind of like, "Oh, who are you? What is this? Like, why are you going through this phase?" And it's like, "No, I'm not going through a phase. Like, I'm just saying no." And that person needs to respect it, and needs to respect the boundaries that you've starting to set for yourself. And yeah, but it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle when you've always been a sort of people pleaser and haven't really done things for yourself, but not for yourself entirely, because I feel like when you're a people pleaser, you start to automatically convince yourself that this is what you want, but it's not really what you want. But then what do you want? And then you don't want to answer that question, so you just stay in what you know, and maybe it doesn't fit you. And so this book really just portrays this so well. And it really makes you realize that, yeah, I need to prioritize myself. And that's okay. And that's good. You know, I'm not being selfish. I'm just being me. And that's okay. And that's good. You need to be you in your life, because this is your life. You're writing your life for you, not for someone else. And once you realize that, I guess I feel like everything starts to get better, and that's beautiful once everything starts to get better. And also, I can very much understand why she wanted to end it all once her husband asked her for divorce, because, as I've said, you're in this very patriarch society where it is ruled by men mostly, and they have a very strong opinion about women when they reach a certain age, and that has stuck in society. And I can get why she got scared and that she couldn't see anything else but this alternative for her, which was putting an end to her life. And the book really just portrays that really well. It also makes me very sad that just because you're having a divorce, I'm understanding hard. It's hard to go through a divorce. I get that totally. But it's just really sad how society has put these sort of thoughts in women's head whenever they reach a certain age, or to attempt to be as good, if not better, than those standards that they've put for ourselves in society. And that's really hard. That's also really sad. And I feel like as time goes, we women really have tried to grow this mentality. But with everything going on right now in the world, I feel like this is going like backtrack. Like we've made one step forward, but I feel like we're doing 3 steps back. I feel like this book also really helps you realize that again and makes you feel like empowered as a woman. And I loved that. I loved that, which was why I gave it like 5 stars. It's just an incredible book. And there's a lot more to life than you would think ever. Because I think most of the things that make you happy in life are the things that were unexpected. And there's a lot of time and space for unexpected things. And everyone needs to embrace that, I feel like. Moving on to the second book, it is called Memoirs of a Psychiatric Expert. It was written by Angélina Delcroix, and it is about Adam Jacquemin is a psychiatrist expert at the Court of Appeal in Lyon. Nearing the end of his career, he decides to confide his memoirs to Jesse Moore, a thriller author. But when he finally makes the decision to definitely retire in Brittany near the forest of Hulgot, weird disappearances start to occur, and they start to frighten their local population. Adam suspects an ancient patient of his and fears for his life, but the police doesn't take him seriously. But then, when the first bodies are found, he decides to investigate on his own in this vast and mysterious region, alternating between criminal souvenirs, mental sickness, and family consequences. This thriller takes us behind the scenes of a mental institution and a psychiatric mental labyrinth an expert is taught to explore. This one book is a brilliant thriller, which is why, without hesitation, I gave this book 5 stars out of 5. Like, there was no other score possible for this one, because it was this good. You truly do not know who committed these murders, if it is the psychiatrist's previous patient or if it's the psychiatrist himself. Like, did all of these studies lead him to commit after all? Like, who knows? You'll have to read it to find out. But this book really questions a murderer's mental responsibility in a crime. And I feel like that was very interesting to read about. Because so many are judged irresponsible because they are diagnosed mentally ill, or they try to plead and be diagnosed mentally ill when they're actually not. And in the past, like many years ago, it probably has worked for a lot of murderers, and they've probably been comfortably sitting in a psychiatric unit when they actually belonged in a jail. But yeah, do some of them profit off of that system to avoid being locked in a jail. And this book really shows you that we might never truly know if they were truly crazy or not. But it's a really interesting book, and it really jumps between the two options, like, is the patient faking? Or is the psychiatrist faking? Or is he actually mentally ill? Like, you don't really know. And it's a really interesting ending, and all of it, like throughout the book, like it's all very much very interesting. And it really keeps you going. Like it keeps you going and it keeps you interested in the story. Like you truly want to know if the psychiatrist is actually crazy or not. So I highly recommend if you're interested in that, and if you like TV shows like Criminal Minds, you'll love this book. Highly recommend. Moving on, the next one is called You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Jeneva Rose, and it is about Grace Evans, an overworked New Yorker looking for a total escape from her busy life. She books an Airbnb on a ranch in the middle of Wyoming. When she arrives, she's pleasantly surprised to find that the owner is a handsome man by the name of Calvin Wells. But there are things Grace discovers that she's not too pleased about: a lack of cell phone service, a missing woman, and a feeling that something isn't right with the town. Despite her uneasiness and misgivings from Calvin's friends and family, the two grow close and start to fall for one another. However, as her departure date nears, things between them start to change for the worse. Grace grows wary of Calvin as his infatuation for her seems to turn into obsession. Calvin fears that Grace is hiding something from him. Told from dual points of view, You Shouldn't Have Come Here is a thrill ride and a cautionary tale of what can go wrong when you open up your house and your heart to a total stranger. This one, I gave it 4 stars out of 5. I was lost for a bit when I was reading this because I couldn't figure out who was the crazy person. Spoiler alert, turns out it was the both of them, which is why I couldn't decide on which one it was. Behind everything, it was a nice little twist that they were actually both crazy and that they were both involved in this craziness. But what shocked me the most out of all the revelations that were revealed, it was the revelation of Andrew being the uncle. And I did not see that one coming because you have this dude in the middle of the book that comes to the cabin, and Calvin pretends that he's another guy that has rented another room in the cabin as part of Airbnb, but it's actually not. It's his uncle, and that one was that one was nice. I did not see that one coming because I was so focused on everything else that went a little bit under the rug. But yeah, I didn't bother investigate on who that person could have actually been. But the atmosphere of the book was very tense the whole time. And because of that tension, I couldn't put the book down. Like literally. I needed to know how it ended and who was behind everything. Like it it literally had everything a thriller book needs. It had a creepy town, a creepy cabin in the middle of nowhere that makes noises at night, the creepy brother, the crazy neighbor that's infatuated with Calvin, overbearing town folks that know all the gossips and don't respect any boundaries. Like, you can't trust anyone, which is also why it made it hard for me to figure the plot out. It all was very messy at one point, and I tried to find the clues left by the author intentionally throughout the book to figure out anything and everything and build my theories from there. But you have this one point in the book where everyone is involved at the same damn time. And so this moment lasts for a bit. And so everyone is going everywhere. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is way too much information. Like, I'm being distracted by this part in the book. And so it was all kind of a little bit messy. But this one time in this book, like both main characters were checking all of my boxes because I have boxes in my head that I check every time there is maybe a clue about who the crazy person or the killer could be. And so with the clues that are left a little bit here and there by the author, whenever I come across one, I check a box on the board that I have in my head. And on my board for that specific book, I did not have a column that said that there was a possibility for the two main characters to be the two crazy ones. And this is where I made a mistake. So now I'm going to be very careful about that. And I advise you to be very careful about that too, because I don't know what you're reading. There might be a possibility out there that it's two people involved that you wouldn't think of. Then my next book is called Eeny, Meeny by M.J. Arlidge. And this book is about two people are abducted, imprisoned, and left with a gun. As hunger and thirst set in, only one walks away alive. It's a game more twisted than any detective Helen Grace has ever seen. If she hadn't spoken with the shattered survivors herself, she almost wouldn't believe them. Helen is familiar with the dark sides of human nature, including her own, but this case, with its seemingly random victims, has her baffled. But as more people go missing, nothing will be more terrifying than when it all starts making sense. A little spoiler alert because I'm going to be going very much in details with this one. I gave this book 4 stars out of 5 too, and I will explain why later I took a star out. This book is the first of the Helen Grace series. I had already read Forget Me Not, and I had loved it so much that I thought to myself, why not read the other ones and the whole series while I'm at it? So, Eeny Meeny is the first one, and I love how MJ Arlidge has short chapters and it makes the whole story very fast paced. Like Forget Me Not, this story is very dark, if not darker, I feel like. The psychological insanity behind the murder was just, whoa, mind blowing. Just like D.I. Helen Grace, I was like, how can one person do this on their own, like without any help? Like, how is this only one person? And I also love when an author incorporates the point of view of the killer and adds like sorts of little details that could help the reader figure out who might be behind it all before D.I. Grace. And that's what I like a lot. You don't immediately get the POV of the killer. Like, you might get one little chapter, if I remember well, like really at the beginning, but then you don't get one for a bit. And so you're longing for those POV chapters because it might explain some of the motive and what they use in their murders. It might explain a lot of things. And so that's also why I like those, not only because they give a lot of details on who it could be, but also what's their motive and why do they torture if they torture like that. Some things like that. That's a very twisted thing to say, but it is a crime investigation book. So, yeah. Compared to Forget Me Not, I couldn't figure out who it truly was. I got way ahead of myself and focused on another character, and it and it wasn't that character. And I thought the killer was someone that was integrated into society, but had this sort of double facade, a facade shown in the public and another shown privately to its victims. So I thought it was this reporter woman, and that she had purposely got herself and her lawyer abducted in order to loosen the focus on her and no longer be a suspect. But no, I was totally wrong. Turns out it was actually the DI's older sister. So the only reason I gave it 4 stars was because I was disappointed with the reveal, and because I think I would have preferred the reveal to be that reporter woman. I feel like it would have given something a lot more twisted, I feel like. But from the beginning of the book, it is said that this killer is directly linked to Helen Grace, and that reporter was not. And also, I thought we, the readers, would always know the character, but under a different name, maybe. Like, like sometimes in those crime investigation books, you actually know the murderer. You read about that character, but they are under a different name, which I think was what happened in Forget Me Not. I might be wrong. I don't remember right now, and I feel like it also gives more, like, it links the two characters a lot more, I feel like. And also, why I took a star out of the score was because the ending with that reveal and the action being a little too fast paced, and then it abruptly ending, I felt like I was left a little bit hanging, and I also feel like I got lost in that very fast paced ending scene because so much was going on, like too much was going on at the same time. Spoiler alert, she shoots her sister, and then the book ends. And that's it. I haven't read the next one, so I haven't been able to get my hands on it just yet, but maybe that was a strategic way of ending the book to make sure that the readers would want to read the next one. And so maybe they're going to be talking about it a little bit in the second one. Who knows? Not me. But overall, it was very good. I think I just got ahead of myself, and that happens sometimes. And I feel like my theory was a better one than the one that was written, and that's okay. But overall, no, it was really good, and the author's ending probably made a lot more sense than mine, and that's okay. And that's probably better. That's why he was the writer and I was not. And I do am gonna read a lot more of this series. I don't know when, but I definitely recommend this series. It's pretty good if you like crime investigation books. The next one is called The Night House by Joe Nesbø, and this story is about, in the wake of his parents' tragic death in a house fire, 14-year-old Richard Alode has been sent to live with his aunt and uncle in the remote insular town of Ballantine. Richard quickly earns a reputation as an outcast, and when a classmate named Tom goes missing, everyone suspects the new, angry boy is responsible for his disappearance. No one believes him when he says the telephone booth out by the edge of the woods sucked Tom into the receiver like something out of a horror movie. No one, that is, except Karen, a beguiling fellow outsider who encourages Richard to pursue clues the police refuse to investigate. He traces the number that Tom prank called from the phone booth to an abandoned house in the Black Mirror Wood. There, he catches a glimpse of a terrifying face in the window. And then, the voices begin to whisper in his ear. You know who I am. She's going to burn. The one you love is going to burn. There's not a thing you can do about it. When another classmate disappears, Richard must find a way to prove his innocence and preserve his sanity. As he grapples with the dark magic that is possessing Valentine and pursuing his destruction. Then again, Richard may not be the most reliable narrator of his own story. Oh my gosh, this book I loved so much. I gave it 5 stars out of 5. This book could literally be turned into a very good psychological horror movie. Like, I'm dead serious. It was so good. The plot twisted, all the different parts having a different story, but also staying with the same characters didn't feel as if it was either too much or too mind losing, you know? Because sometimes when you have too much going on, you're like, whoa, let's backtrack here a little bit because I'm getting lost and I'm not understanding anything. But with this author and how he wrote, it was absolutely not like that. Everything was perfectly clear, and I loved that about this book. The segments were very well executed, and it didn't feel too much, but it also didn't feel like we didn't have enough. You know, we didn't lack of anything, and that was great. Like, each part had the perfect balance for the plot, and the main character of this story, called Richard, as it was said in the synopsis, he was quite the character, like very interesting. Like all of his layers were so good. Like I'm not even kidding. Like he was very complete in every way you could possibly think. And I loved reading his point of view, whether it was in part one, in part two, or in part three. Like I really felt like I was him. And like I completely lost myself in that book. And that's probably because he was so multi-layered and complex, but also very simple. Like he was such a complete character, and I loved reading his point of view. I really did. I was also very satisfied with the ending. It all felt so complete, and the plot twist also made a lot of sense. Like everything was just so complete. Like we started the book with this storyline, it had this and that, but everything was sorted out by the end of it. And I loved it. Like nothing was left out, everything was complete. And I loved that. And the atmosphere also was very daunting, very dark, and very spooky. Like it's the perfect October read. If you like horror stuff, you'll be so satisfied with it and you'll feel like you jumped into a little horrific town. And I loved that. And I read this in October, so I did keep that book for October. I was like, there's no other way for me to read this besides when it's October. And it was. And I loved it. Highly recommend it as well. And last but not least, I read All Her Faults by Andrea Mara. And this book is about one missing boy. Marissa Irvine arrives at 14 Tudor Grove expecting to pick up her young son, Milo, from his first playdate with a boy at his new school. But the woman who answers the door isn't a mother she recognizes. She isn't the nanny. She doesn't have Milo. And so begins every parent's worst nightmare. Four guilty women, as news of the disappearance filters through the quiet Dublin suburb and an unexpected suspect is named, whispers start to spread about the women most closely connected to the shocking event, because only one of them may have taken Milo, but they could all be blamed. In a community full of secrets, who is really at fault? Now, what a crazy one this was. I was completely mind blown. Like, the thought of who abducted Milo never, ever crossed my mind. Well, it did, because in 99.9% of child abduction cases, the abductor is close to the family. And so I did think that, but I didn't think it would be that close. Like, that's crazy. The tension build was great. It was phenomenal, jumping from one suspect to another as details are unveiled. The Irish atmosphere was very present. I did feel like I was completely teleported in Dublin. And also, what I loved about this book is that there's so many characters that sometimes you might get lost, but actually no, because these characters, these side characters, were very well built. And they really added something to the story and the plot. It really helped the plot thicken, if that makes sense, with their complexities, because there's a lot of complex characters in this story, like the mom, the nanny, the woman that hired the nanny who is suspected to have abducted Milo, the family members of the child that was abducted, and even the other kids at Milo's school. Like all their presences helped the plot in one way or another. And the whole story keeps the reader hanging and entertained and busy, and it keeps you theorizing constantly. And that's what I loved about it. It really, like, at one point you're reading and you're like, oh, this has to be that person, and then it takes that person out of the picture and you're like, okay, well then this is that person. Like you immediately jump to another person. And I feel like that's what the author also wants, but she did it in such an amazing way. And I loved jumping from one suspect to another. Um, Everything was so well written. The tension almost becomes unbearable as you get closer to the reveal and the end of the book. And you're like, I want to know what's going on so bad. Like, please, you've got to tell me at one point. Like, I can't keep doing this, going from one suspect to another. Like, I need to know this time. But everything happens for a reason in this book, and it's very well done. It's very well executed. I'm telling you, if you read this book, I'm telling you, you will be theorizing about at least 100 people while reading this book. Like, this is a canon event. Like, you will have to go through that phase. It's undeniable, and yeah, you will not have any other choice. But yeah, I really loved that book. I think I read it so fast, but I really enjoyed it. And it is one of those rare books lately that got me entirely surprised until the end. I know a friend of mine read it and had guessed it, but I hadn't. I was like on a totally different road. But that's what I like about those books. Um, it kind of felt like it was a twist like Frida McFadden's books, and I loved that. I love those twists. So I definitely and highly recommend you this book if you love thrillers. There's not too much horror in it. It's really an investigation, but differently, and it's not too much in the details, because this is about a child abduction. So, these cases can be very dark. And so it is dark, but it's not that dark. Like, it could have been a lot more darker, but it was not. And it was the perfect pitch. And my mom read it as well, and she loved it. And I think my sister's going to read it next. So, yeah, I definitely recommend this book. Well, this is it. We've come to the end of this book meeting club. I hope you enjoyed it. And I would very much like to know if you read a few of these books. Comment on Spotify if you can. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.